जप 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 मेहर का नाम जप 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 रे।
Jai Bob, everyone. I'm delighted to join you for this virtual young adult Sahavas. I'm so glad to be included. And what a wonderful theme, seeking Baba within. Well, we can't be together in person these days, but we can remember what Baba tells us, that those who are united in love know no separation. The Divine Beloved is always in us, with us, and around us. We are not separate from Him. You know, when my mother, Jane, first met Meherabad in May of 1958, one of the very first things Baba said to her is, "Jane, do not look at this form. This is not Baba." What did he mean? This is not Baba. Well, I feel he meant Meher Baba in the human form is the gateway to Meher Baba. It's the gateway. You know, Meher Baba gave us so much. He gave us discourses. He gave us the Mandali and their wonderful example, you know, and many of us have spent many hours with them, learning from them, seeing and how Baba did what he did. His tomb shrine, where we can go and be in his presence and feel his love. The center in Myrtle Beach, which he calls my home in the West. Mayor Mount, so much Baba has given us. And I think of these, all of these, as clues. They are ways to pick up the scent, the fragrance of Meher Baba within. For me, it's like a treasure hunt, right? It's like a treasure hunt. We're all seeking that treasure within. And when our longing is great and the world needs it the most, he takes form to provide the clues that we need to find him within ourselves. So that's what all this is. But to borrow from a Zen koan, mistaking the clues Baba gave us, right, for Baba is like mistaking the finger pointing to the moon for the moon. They are not Baba. His words, his actions, the Mandali, the tomb are all means of his awakening to himself within each of us. Or as he famously said, "I have come not to teach, but to awaken." He didn't come to give discourses. He didn't, come to build buildings or create centers. We do all of these things to keep him here. That's our way. That's how religions are formed, But Baba didn't come for any of that. He came to wake himself up in us through love. And so he gave us all of these things, not so that we would seize on them and make them some sort of ritual or some sort of dogma, which of course humans do, and we've done it for centuries, but that's not why he gave them. He gave them so that we would have a way of finding him within ourselves. So Meher Baba is not Meher Baba. Really. Meher Baba is, I would say, we would quote what he says. Meher Baba, he says, is our true self. No more, no less. The humor of the divine game, Baba has said, is that the one who is sought is himself the seeker. It is the sought who prompts the seeker to ask, where can I find him whom I seek? The seeker asking, where is God? Is really God saying, where indeed is the seeker? When it was my turn to meet Meher Baba, 2 days after my mother met him in 1958, I was 8 years old. My meeting him was not a meeting at all. It was an experience of recognition. That so familiar that it was like I had seen him the day before and this was seeing him again. It was that familiar. Everything about him seemed something I already knew. And as I ran into his arms, it was like being reunited with someone I had known a very, very long time. But then Meher Baba left Myrtle Beach at the end of May in 1958. A lot happened between that first meeting and when he left. But of course the time came for the Sahavas to be over. By the way, just to say, this is what I looked like back then. So I'm going to hold up a picture so you can see. This picture was taken a couple of days after I met Baba. Let's see if I can hold it up correctly so you can see it. I hope I have the right height. No idea. So between his leaving the center in 1958 and us going to India for the East-West Gathering in 1962, I had gotten to know Baba through his absence, his physical absence, which was difficult for me, and I longed to see him, but it was that longing that made him present. Really, longing for Baba is the key to his presence in our lives. You don't long for someone, they're not present. And in that longing, he became a companion, a very familiar presence. I remember as a child walking around at the center in Myrtle Beach after Baba left and talking out loud to him and writing little poems to him, and I was developing a relationship with my Baba. And that was perhaps easier for a child because when Baba and I saw each other during the Sahavas, we didn't talk and I didn't ask questions. I mean, I was 8 years old. It was just this spontaneous back and forth where he would touch me, he would pat me, he would hug me. And so it wasn't in words, it was just being with him. And so when he left physically, I continued just to feel him and try to be with him and long for him. And of course, I also wanted to see him again physically. Every day, and this is true, not a day went by between the time he left in May of 58 and the time we went to India in November 1962. Not a day went by when I didn't think, is he going to call us today? Is Baba going to call us to India to see him? Or is he going to come back here? Not a day. And I waited word. You know, in those days, the only way you could get the word from India was a telegram, right? I mean, that was the fastest way. And so when the phone rang, I think, well, maybe the telegram is Western Union calling, and it would be a telegram from Baba, and he's going to call us to India. Every time the phone rang, I can remember this growing up. I had that back in my head. Maybe this is it. And then finally one day it was. It was it. Baba had called us to the East-West Gathering. And of course, there was great joy and excitement for me to know that I'll be seeing him physically again. But here's the thing, at the same time, there was some anxiety. Why? Because I had become close to him. Or to put it another way, I had become close to my Baba. I had become intimate with my Baba. And part of me, when we were called to India, wondered, is my Baba Baba? What happens if I get to Guru Prasad and what I have all grown to know so well in these 4 years is different from Baba sitting there in some way? I don't know how I got that anxiety, but I did. So my main feeling was of joy and excitement to see Baba, but there was this part of me that had some anxiety. What, would it be the same? Is my Baba Baba, if you will? Well, the day came, and Baba called the women in the morning, the Western women first, and they had their time, and then he called the Western men, and of course I went with them. And I lined up outside Guru Prasad, and slowly the line moved towards the threshold, and I began to get excited, but also to think, is this my Baba? Is Baba my Baba? I don't know if I'm saying it right, but maybe you can feel what I'm saying. I just had this, feeling, the wonder, anxiety, if you will. And then I got up to the threshold. I took my shoes off. And I crossed over the threshold. And this fragrance hit me. I can't say how to describe it except as it was almost thick, like you could part it with your hands. But it was the same fragrance as when I was near Baba in 1958. Baba was all the way in the back of the room. I couldn't even see him because there was a line in front of me, but that fragrance hit me, and I knew instantly, this is my Baba. As I was thinking that, I saw his hand shoot up above the crowd, and that beautiful hand, and that was Baba. And then I could relax. I could be happy. I could wait my turn, because now it was just joy, because I was seeing my Baba. I was going to embrace my Baba once again. And I got up to him, and Erich said, Charles Baba. It was Erich's job to call out and introduce or reintroduce everyone who came up to Baba. Okay? He would call out their name. Charles Baba. And then I rushed to embrace him and whisper in his ear, I love you, Baba. How do we find our Baba? Or better, how do we grow in that companionship with our Baba, not someone else's Baba, right? Not the Baba you read about, although that gives you a clue. Not the Baba the Mandali told you about, although you get clues, but your Baba. Well, I'm going to offer two things that have helped me in my life, and I hope they help you. I'll share them with you. And the first is we have to listen to Baba. To find him within, we have to listen to him. This comes from my experience growing up with Elizabeth Patterson. As many of you know, she was one of Meher Baba's closest Western disciples. She was the founder with Princess Machiavelli of the Center in Myrtle Beach, the editor of the Meher Baba journals. She drove Baba in the Blue Bus tours. She drove him during the accident in 1952. She was very close to Meher Baba. So I was very blessed that she was my spiritual mother. She was my family's link to Baba. She's the one who told us about Meherabad. And she adopted my family as her family. And so I really learned Baba's ways from being around her and Kitty Davy, for my childhood. But I wondered, I called her Auntie Boo because when I met her, she said, we were little children. I was 7 when I first met her. And she said, when I was a child, I couldn't say Elizabeth. So I called myself Boo. So you can call me Auntie Boo. And so we did. And so for the rest of my life, the rest of her life, I called her Auntie Boo. So one day I just decided I'm going to ask her, how does she know what Baba wants for her every day? How does she seems to always have a sense of what Baba wants from her, and she always lived every day as though it was the only day of her life. She lived every day putting Baba first and doing her best. And I thought, well, how does she do that? So many people seem to me to be, at that time I was going through, even people associated with Baba, tortured by, should I do this? Should I do that? And is this right? Is this my ego? Is this Baba? All that stuff. And so I wonder, well, how does she do it? She seems so poised and so, going through life serving Baba in a way that didn't seem as though she were anxious about it at all. So one day I decided I'm going to ask her. And I said, Auntie Boo, I went into her bedroom. I sat on the edge of her bed. That was her office. And I said, how do you know what Baba wants you to do every day? How do you know that? Oh, she smiled and she said, well, you see, she said, each morning I take some time. A few minutes is all that's needed. And I keep silent. And I listen to Baba. Now, she said, with a twinkle in her eye, he doesn't answer in so many words. But she said, the day becomes the answer. And so I've tried with, not like Elizabeth, I'm still striving, but I try to do that in my life. I try to listen to Baba. Because what she meant was that in everything that happens to her during the day, everything that happens to us during the day, people we meet, situations we get in, difficult, easy, beautiful, hard, he's speaking. And it's for us to listen. What is he saying? But she said if you do that in the morning, you're more aware then, in the day, that he will be speaking. He will be answering you. You asked, what should I do, Baba? And the day is the answer. The day, the events, the people. And that was her practice. The second piece of advice, which has shaped my life and is related to the first, is follow your conscience. Now, what do I mean? Your conscience. I think of the conscience, it's really the capacity of your heart to hear that inner voice. Your conscience is that part of each of us that tells us what is true or not, what is right, what is wrong. It's that part of us that urges us to follow our deeply held convictions, our moral principles. Well, a little test. Have you ever wanted to do something and you somehow knew you shouldn't do it? Well, that happens to me almost every day. That's our conscience. Right? Simple thing. It's our conscience. We have that capacity. And we all kind of know it. So our conscience speaks. We don't always listen, of course. Sometimes we override it. Sometimes we ignore it. But it's there and it's speaking. Baba, in my view, speaks through our conscience. We say he speaks in our heart, which is true, but I think more specifically it's our conscience, that part of our heart, if you will, guiding us to do not what we want to do, but what is right to do. Guiding us to act in ways that will please him. But for Baba to speak through our conscience, we have to form our conscience so that we recognize his voice. Right? I mean, we're not just born with our formed conscience and we know right from wrong and we know this and that. I mean, we have our sanskaras from many, many lifetimes we bring with us. So we might have, when we're born, all kinds of ideas about what's right or wrong coming up within our conscience. But in this lifetime consciously, we want to make sure that we form our conscience so that we hear him when he speaks. Now that too can come from lifetimes. Many of you listening to this have probably been with Baba many times, and that has shaped your conscience over time. So you don't start from zero in this life. So that's where the clues come in, to go back to that metaphor. That's where the example of the mandali come in. For me, Elizabeth and Kitty, right? That's where the discourses come in. Because they shape us, inform us. All of these shape the conscience. So we read about stories of his life. And so we get his fragrance. This is the ways of Baba, right? And, after a while, you sort of say, you recognize it. That's Baba. That's so much like Baba. Well, we have to shape our conscience that way so that when we go in and examine our conscience and try to discern what it is Baba wants from us, we hear that voice. And again, it might not be in so many words, it might not speak to us in so many words, but he will show us. And we'll say, oh, that's Baba. That's Baba. It's not a coincidence, it's Baba. Right? You've all had this experience, I'm sure. Now, following one's conscience, listening to Baba inwardly, is not always easy, right? I mean, it's counter to the ego. Right? It's counter to what we want to do. So it's not easy that way, and sometimes it's painful because it's counter to what the world wants us to do. Sometimes it's challenging because we have to do something that we didn't think we could do or wanted to do. So it's not easy to follow the conscience. I mean, it's not. I'll give a very stark example of this, right? During the Holocaust. Many people in Germany just went along. Some were even complicit. Some helped when the Jews were taken away from their neighborhood. Some informed on the Jews. They live here, they do that. But there were some who spontaneously, in some cases, just simply stood up and risked their lives to protect the Jews, to take them in their homes in some cases, even to stand up to authorities and get themselves arrested. That's conscience. Those people's conscience was formed, could be by their religious upbringing, could be by their family, could be by their many lifetimes of shaping who they are. But in that moment of crisis, they acted spontaneously. They didn't think, oh, should I do this or not? They just knew they had to do it. Conscience is sometimes doing what you must do because it's right. Not because it's easy, not because you want to do it, but because you know deep inside it's right and it's what God wants. Some years ago, I guess 20 now, something like that, I faced a great crisis in my life. The details of that are not important for right now, but it was a great crisis. Suffice to say, it was a test of faith, and I struggled to know what to do. I had to take a stand, and I knew that I had to try to follow what I felt deep inside was right, what I felt Baba wanted me to do. But there were others around me, including some people that I had considered very close to Baba, who said, no, you're wrong. That's not what Baba would want. And so, of course, that made me doubt. So I would go in, examine my conscience and say, well, Baba, is this right? And the more I did that, the more I felt, no, this is the conviction I have. I have to do this. I have to take a stand. Even if everyone was against me, and there were many who weren't, but I mean, even if everyone thought I was wrong, if my conscience told me that I should do something for Baba, that I believed that I should do it. That's what I was beginning to think, but then I would have doubts. So I went back and forth, and one day, this true story, I'm sitting there in my room, and I look up on my shelf, and I see all these little old pamphlets that Elizabeth had given me many years ago, early pamphlets that they published for Baba many years ago. And I went on the shelf and just randomly pulled one off. One that I don't remember ever opening before, frankly. And it's this one. It's called The Sayings of Sri Meherabad. And it was published in 1933. So one of the very early pamphlets published by Westerners of Baba's sayings. And I opened it up, and my eyes fell on this saying from Meherabad. Do nothing, not even to please me or the world, against the dictates of your own conscience. Unhesitatingly do what you think to be right and proper, despite the opposition of the world. Let your mind be as firm as a rock that resists strong blasts of wind from all sides. I'm going to read that again. One of the great gifts Baba has given me is this saying. Do nothing even to please me or the world against the dictates of your own conscience. Unhesitatingly do what you think to be right and proper, despite the opposition of the world. Let your mind be as firm as a rock that resists strong blasts of wind from all sides. I felt very reassured. I felt that Baba had given me a clue. Not that I was right and the other people were wrong. They were probably following their conscience too, right? But what Baba wants is that when our conscience speaks, or when he speaks in us, let's put it that way, I must have the courage to listen and follow what I feel deep within to be true. I may learn differently someday. I grow, we all grow, change. But Baba wants us to grow through following that inner guidance of our conscience. He wants us to keep shaping the conscience with more and more about him so that we can sense his presence and his ways and his fragrance when we go within and listen to what he wants us to say. And when we face each day, we see and hear and feel what he's speaking. He's speaking all the time, right? In every moment he's speaking. With love, he's speaking. But it's for us to hear it. So those are the two things that I would say that I've learned or gathered from Baba in my life with Baba. Listen to Baba. Follow your conscience. Be true to your Baba, not my Baba. Not the Baba of the next person over here, or even the Baba of the manjula, as wonderful as that is. But to your Baba, the one who is revealing himself in your heart, in your conscience. This is my deep conviction, is what it means to seek Baba within. Meherabad says, the voice that is heard deep within the soul is my voice. The voice of inspiration, of intuition, of guidance. Through those who are receptive to that voice, I speak. Through those who are receptive to that voice, I speak. Thank you for letting me be part of your Sahavas. Much love to you each and our beloved. May he hold you close in his embrace, now and forever. Jai Meherabad.